Yeah, so we're going to be talking a little bit about the harmony. And harmony is between extremes of indulgence on one side and severe, harsh, critical, punishing extremes on the other, as the Buddha taught at Isipatana, the deer park, where he gave his first teachings. And here we are, nearly 2,600 years later, where we're having a pretty good enduring sangha. Nothing's ever perfect, as we'll see from a story I'm going to tell you a little bit later on about. Even in the Buddha's time, there could be monks who also even highly trained in scriptures, suttas, and able to teach those, or been able to memorize all the rules, every single pinickety tiny little rule, and every little regulation, and every little subtle point of the monks' training rules, could still have missed everything by a long way. So we need to find this harmony of the middle way, the majjhima, and avoid these two extremes of being too serious on one side or too foolish on the other. Too serious on one side and too foolish on the other. So Isipatana, that's the Dhammacakkappavattana Sutta, where the Buddha started the teaching with the first 5 ascetics, and giving always from then on until, and not deviating, although he slightly evolved his styles of teaching, pretty much the teaching stayed consistent through those 45 years of teaching up until this time. So there was an example of monks who had been sharing space, and they had followings. One master was teaching the scriptures. He was teaching suttas. He was very knowledgeable about them. And then he could get a strong following from his monks, and they were very, very, very devoted and very faithful to him. Now, there was another master, and he was teaching and training in scriptures, in the training rules, in the Patimokkha, in the Vinaya, in the training rules, which there's very many. There's more than 227 when you go on into the very, very minor and subtle aspects as well. So those are food for someone who's a control freak, or someone who's too severe and loves, like this kind of obsessive compulsive style of fierce and shaming sort of behavior. And a person like that can be missing the point of the teachings by miles. They can be really out of touch with the meaning and the common sense of the Buddha's teachings. And in any time, whether it's now or it was then, human nature has fairly much stayed the same. And we saw in this case where these two groups of monks were in a monastery, and therefore they were sharing the bathrooms, and everyone has to go from time to time. So, but there is etiquette for doing that. And there's even some rules which say like how you should do it. But people come from different areas of India, and they come from different areas of their family style of doing things, or they're just simply forgetful. And there was a sort of system there for filling up the buckets of water as you left, or leaving it for the next person, and they do it. But this caused a quarrel, just put it that way. And this quarrel didn't just sort of come out as a one shout or a complaint at the dinner table. It went on and on and on and on. And it seemed like the discipline master, the master of the rules, was determined to humiliate the other monk. And he wanted him to do a big confession in front of everybody else that he hadn't done this toilet flushing. So it seemed pretty pathetic, let's face it. But people are people. That's not the fault of the Buddha, and it's not the fault of the Vinaya, which is there to just help things to sort of run smoothly amongst people. And the Buddha heard about this, and so he came over. And he had a word with them, and he said, "Look, settle down. Try not to be stuck on like, my way's right, you're wrong. My way's right, you're wrong. I'm going to make you look right, and you're going to have to acknowledge you're right in front of everyone else." And that's and it escalated up and up. And the Buddha said, "No, we don't do like that. We will try to, consider the other person's point of view and not try to be on our own proud high horse about it all. And I'm super right, you're super wrong. That's not the way. That's not the harmonious way. So the Buddha did that, and then he thought, that should be it. I've explained how to calm things down, so they can go off on their way now, and we all should be able to get back to our peaceful practice and meditation. But no, he had gone back to his place, and he got the news. No, they're even worse than before. The words have been very wounding, very quarrelsome. They're blaming each other, and neither of them is going to back down as well. So this is the way quarrels are, isn't they? No one's prepared to be saying that they're wrong, and everyone's sure that they're in their own fixed way for years. I'm right, I'm right, I'm right. I was right all along. They were wrong. So what happened was that the Buddha came back, tried to talk about it. One monk even stood up right in front of the Buddha and said, hey, you keep out of this. It's nothing to do with you. You just go off and carry on your meditation. We can sort this out. We don't need your help. We're not children. We're grown adults. And there was a stunned silence after this. No one had spoken to the Buddha in this way. So it was really like a display of how petty and silly things have become. So the Buddha calmly picked up his bowl, picked up his robe, picked up his bag, and just walked away, just having nothing to do with it. So he left them to it, and they ended up losing all of their support from the local town of Kosambi. People in that city had heard about it. So by that point, they said, oh, we're not going to get any food. So that might not work. Okay, we will calm down then. We will sort it out. And here we are, 2,500 or 2,600 years later, still talking about it. So it just shows how pathetic human nature can be. But the Buddha, went to his arms, and then he went up into the forest outside Kosambi, and there was Kimbila, Anuruddha, and another monk who were there, and they invited him in. And it must be very kind of hurtful to see, after you've tried so carefully to nurture this beautiful thing, the Sangha, into existence, just to see this petty quarreling going on. So it must have been disheartening somewhat, but the Buddha understood human nature. And then it was so nice for him to come across these three monks, no quarreling. And they invited him in, they took his bowl, they offered him water and showed him where the bathroom is, and then, cleared a place for him to sit. And he said, how are you monks? Are you going okay? And they were like, we are so happy. It's a blessing to be amongst these other monks. And it makes us so happy. It makes it so rewarding. So thank you so much for setting up the Sangha in this kind of way. And the Buddha was like, well, how do you keep harmony then? What's the way that you monks are doing that? Tell me, what's the way that you keep peace? So the monks explained, well, we think carefully of each other. We act very kindly to each other. We talk with sweet words. We talk with kind words. We speak gently, sincerely, and clearly and directly. And when the others are not around, I will do everything I can to make the place nice for when they come back. And if there's any extra food, then I'll also put my bowl to one side, or put some empty bowl to one side, and share some of my food in there if they want anything. And if they don't get much food and they come back, then they'll be able to have some. So it's just lovely, considerate care, complete contrast to the other selfish monks who are all on their ego and their pride and determined to be sort of humiliating and a game of one-upmanship with none of them backing down. So these are the ways of humans, and this is the way of harmony that the Buddha is saying. Now this is a Sangha. This is the right way to be. And those are the correct principles for remaining in harmony with other people that you're living with. And this can be applying to lay life. It's not just only for monks in forests and so on, but it's for people in all walks of life. They can follow those rules, follow those guidelines. They're not rules. Like all of the guidelines Buddha laid down, they're really meant to be taken as as a guide. There was a good story about a Zen teacher, and he had a very clever student who was with him who had found so many holes and so many loopholes and catches and faults in the suttas and in the rules that his faith had completely fallen apart. And he went to see his teacher, and the teacher knew his mind, and he knew his temperament like this. And he said to him, and this Zen teacher had a favorite dog, and he was with the dog, and he says, "Let me show you something." So he threw the stick for his dog to come to fetch, and the dog came back with a stick in his mouth, and he took it, and then he said, "I'm going to ask the dog to fetch the moon." So he fetch, and he said, he pointed at the moon. He said, "Fetch the moon, fetch the moon." And then he said to the student, he says, "Do you understand?" And he said, not really." And he says, "Well, where's the dog looking?" And he said, "Well, he's looking at your finger." And he says, "Exactly. We're only pointing the way as teachers, and you shouldn't confuse the action that's pointing the way to the goal, to the real goal, which is really Nibbana." And at that point, the young monk understood clearly what the teacher was trying to explain. It's not to get caught up on those rules and regulations, not to get caught up on the suttas themselves, hair splitting about translations and so on, but to listen to the common sense and the meaning in the original intention and the purpose of it. There's another Zen nice little proverb, and it says that in matters of practicing religion, it says some people are content to just chew the menu rather than to eat the food. It says it all very much. We should go gently. That's that we shouldn't be fighting and arrogant and contentious in that way. Yeah, there's the Buddha talks about moving like how bumblebees go through a garden or through where the area where there's flowers. They just hover. They just gently take pollen, and they'll just move on without disturbing the flowers. They don't barge in and go, "Right, we're here, out the way." They don't do like that. It's very, very gentle when you see also monks moving through an area where they're getting alms food. That's the meaning of this. They'll just alight, but they don't stop. They don't become a part, fixture of the family. They don't sort of move in. They don't spend their hours and boring the people. They just simply take the alms food, leave a blessing gracefully from the flowers, as it were, and then move on. Yeah, so I've noticed in my morning walks here, there's a bird, yellow bird, and it's so beautiful. I think that nature is one of the things that can clarify our minds, like nothing else. Sometimes when we're caught in too many ideas, too many teachings, too many concepts, too much language learning, we can miss the point. This bird has a beautiful yellow coat and a grey and white stripe and a black line. And it seems to take great curiosity with me as well. It sits on a barbed wire fence looking in something like in England, we have a bird called the robin, which is red. And that will often, where someone's digging in the garden, many worms come up. And so they'll often sit on the handle of the digging shovel, and it's kind of like a friend of the gardener. So the yellow bird sits, especially after we've had rain all night long. They just seem to like they've had laundry. They've had a sort of fresh coat. They almost seem proud of their coat. They also look at me with great curiosity as well. It's a lovely experience to see that. I like the moon simile as of Nibbana. It's always very touching. When I was a child, I remember that when we were traveling in the car from the village to town to visit my grandparents, we would go along a very winding road that had lots of ups and downs around, and there were some lovely trees that would arch over the road with all golden leaves. But that road went through some beautiful hills on the way. And as a result of that, I used to look at the moon, the full moon, out of the car window. And it always seemed to me that I asked my parents, how come it is that the moon is following us? How come the moon's, whichever way I look round, it's there right behind us? We go sort of this way, and there it is as well, and there it is. And it just always seemed to be coming along after the car, like it was trying to do that on its own. The moon simile is used in a great many stories. It's a beautiful representation of the nature of Nibbana. It has the clarity and a constancy about it. It's an always availability there as well, no matter what comes and what goes. I've noticed that when I left the Sangha back in 1989, and for 21 or more years, I worked out the world, here, there, all over the world, and like many dramas and all sorts of things. And then in 2009, I flew back again, and there was a monk standing there, and I was like, "Aren't you the monk?" And he said, "Yes, I was ordained on the same day as you." And I was like, "Well, what have you been doing since then?" He hadn't been doing anything. And the energy in the temples, very, very grounded, very calm. Really had nothing had changed, because the reference for them is Nibbana. It's not technology, it's not social forces, it's not economic forces. It's this never-changing, timeless quality of Nibbana. And the problem is always how to see that, and that's not easy for people to do. Sometimes we just have to settle down. One of my teachers from Vietnam, he says this beautiful story about when he was in France. He went to France, and there were some refugee children who were put under his guidance and protection. There were quite a lot of people who were boat people, and they had gone over to France to take care. And he was a bit worried about them, but they managed to be able to fit in very easily, incredibly smoothly, and make friends, amazingly. So some of these friends, a group of 5 of them, had come up to his cottage in the forest, up on the hillside, and they were going to go and play out on the hillside together and make friends. So he gave them some drinks, because they just climbed up the hill. It was quite pretty hot, and France can be pretty hot. Up in that area, they grew a lot of apples, and so they'd crushed them and they'd made them into apple juice. So this was okay, a big sort of bottle of this. And they poured this one by one until it came to the 5th one, and at the bottom of the bottle, they're going to have a lot of particles, a lot of bits and pieces, be quite cloudy. And he poured it out, and the little girl, and they're only like 5 or 6 years old, he was like, "Non, non, monsieur." She called him granddad monk. Grand-père moi. So then wouldn't have anything to do with it, left it. Ugh. So they all drank their drink, the other ones, lovely, and they went off out. And then after a little bit of playing around, and they came back, and this one came back, but she couldn't reach the faucet, the tap for water, for drinking water. And so she called him, "Grand-père moi, grand-père moi, grand-père moi. Aidez-moi, aidez-moi." So she wanted a drink. So he said, "Why? Yes, for sure. But why don't you drink the apple juice?" He goes, "Oh, I dislike the horrible cloudy drink." So he said, "Are you sure?" So she said, "Oui." Oh. So she looked at it, and sure enough, there was a glass of absolutely pure, clear apple juice. She said, "Oh, c'est ça." So she drank. Tu imagines en anglais, I'm trying to parler français, très amusant. No? They drank this drink, and lo and behold, it was perfect. What? She said, that's very strange. That's very strange indeed. How come before it's disgusting and now it's very beautiful? Beautiful. She went, oh. He said, no, you just leave it for half an hour and it will go perfectly clear. She said, oh, I understand. The glass of apple juice wants to be like Grandpa Monk with his meditation. He said, yes, that's very true. That's very true. Actually, it's not quite true. No, Grandpa Monk wants to be like the apple juice. It's not always easy, and sometimes we make mistakes. I mean, there's always the life is full of dangers as well, as we've all seen with COVID-19, and many people have lost family members. There's an episode that happened to me that was before the COVID lockdown. I was in another area of the Philippines, and the rainy season was there, the very humid, and I'd got a terrible cough at that time. So what I want to tell you about is how that death is always our eternal companion. We should always reflect that that death is never far away. It's always in a way just to our side, always just waiting, tapping you on the shoulder. You never know when it's going to happen. None of us. So I had this experience where I'd had 2 or 3 days severe coughing, and there's a lot of respiratory and infections that can happen in the area, and heavy rain, heavy coughing. So I'd asked a neighbor out the window, I said, is there any way, do you have any cough mixture, or is anything anyone can bring? So they had brought me some cough mixture, and I'd put it on a table in my room, and I'd pretty much forgotten about it. But I was on my way to the bathroom, and I picked it up, and I thought, well, I'd do anything to get rid of this cough. I just ought to take a lot of medicine. So I drank some of this, and I went to the loo. And then after loo, on the way back, sure enough, there it was. I thought, I better take some more. This is really heavy, and the more I take, the better. Let's just get rid of this. So I took some more, and I didn't realize that I'd drunk about 80% of this little bottle. But in England, where I come from, most cough mixtures are quite regulated. Less so here in the Philippines. So I went back to my room, meditate, relax, and before long, I was in Buddha dream world, in a fantasy world of mountains and colored skies and floating Buddhas and angels and butterflies flying around, flying through the air, feeling blissful. And this was awfully strange. And suddenly I sort of came out of the bliss world to find, oh, I'm lying on the bed, and whoa, my legs aren't working, and my hands feel pretty funny. My face is feeling a bit numb, and I'm feeling very beautifully relaxed. And I just and I was back in Buddha dream world again, with all the heavenly abodes and thousands of angels everywhere, and wonderful journeys flying through the skies. And then when I come back again, and all of my arms and all of my legs weren't working, and it was getting dark outside, and I was like, I'm not sure everything's okay. And lo and behold, my whole face had started to stop working. And I was pretty sure this wasn't altogether right. I was off into Buddha dream world again, and then suddenly back again, and my whole body wasn't working. No, something was definitely wrong. And I was convinced that what was happening was that I had some kind of typhoid or meningitis brain infection, because I could actually feel numbness inside my brain moving around. And I was sure that this was an infection. I was getting also quite paranoid at that time. So I felt, no, there's really something wrong. And I tried texting to some friends, and they just told me, you'd better go to hospital. And I was and my whole tongue and mouth and everything, throat and everything wasn't working. So I, sure enough, tried to just go to the hospital. I couldn't even go across the bedroom floor. I just dragged myself step by step, slowly across the floor, managed to get the front door open, and crawled across the front yard of this area, which there were some neighboring houses nearby, bamboo houses, and I just screamed and shouted for help as much as I could. Sure enough, actually, a tricycle came along, like a motorbike tricycle, and they stopped, and I was just laying in the road. And they gave me a lift, and they saw what was happening, kindly got me onto the motorbike, onto the tricycle, and took me to the hospital. And the hospital simply said, I think you've had a transient stroke. It's very severe, and I know my grandma had had a stroke, and some of my relatives had heart attacks in their time. So I thought, well, this is it. So I was taken into the hospital, and I had several hours to wonder about all this, because inside I was quite awake and aware. But I was convinced that was it, because my legs weren't working, my arms weren't working, and my face wasn't working. I couldn't speak. I'd worked before with brain damaged children, and I was convinced that this was what had happened. It was brain damage somehow from a virus. And this was it. I was going to have the rest of my life in a wheelchair and using speech therapy or something, but no speaking. And for the rest of my life, at the age of sort of 55, 54, I was going to have to spend the rest of my life in a wheelchair. It's a very shocking idea. And the doctors were saying, you've had a transient stroke. And then a friend of mine arrived who was a bit more experienced in these things. And he was like, which medicines did you take again? So you took a turquoise tranquilizer tablet earlier on, and you'd taken, and what was it called? It was called, all right. How much did you drink? You took that much. And they're like, oh, I think I know what's happened. I think this is a cough mixture you've taken. That's in the Philippines, they have a narcotic variety that's high in morphine content, an opiate derivative. I think you may have just been having a bit of an overdose by mistake. So, sure enough, when the time came to about 1 o'clock in the morning, my arms came back to life, my legs came back to life, and I was able to walk out, get a tricycle, and walk home and talk all the way to the driver, tell him what had happened, have a good laugh, and get home and have a good night's sleep. And then in the morning, I went all the way back to the hospital because I'd dropped my glasses on the way somewhere, and I found them. I wanted to hug everybody in the whole street. I was really delighted. So this is what happens, what it's like when you get a wake-up call that this death or any illness can happen to any of us at any moment, and it makes you fully alive, fully awake, hugely grateful for what you have in life. And we never think, hey, I've got legs, I've got speech, I've got thinking and communicating, I've got other people that will help me, I've got so many things. So this is what we have to remember, and the Buddha was always saying this with Marana Sati, is remember and recollect that at any time you can go. You die. I had a phone call in the night with my mother, and she said to me, I've got some bad news. And your brother, he's been killed. He's died in an accident. There's been an accidental death while he was boating and out on his boat with his 2 daughters and 2 friends. They were fishing. They were in a heavy river that was very wavy. It meets the ocean. The boat has turned upside down, and the 2 daughters, very young, 6 years old, 8 years old, had got to the shore safely, and he didn't make it. And he died also of drowning. So drowning is very painful. You have the experience of water gushing in, and it's a very painful death as well. So I really also am sure that one of the saving graces of this is that I'm pretty sure he knew that his daughters had already made it to the safety of the shore, and it would have been also very also difficult if it had been the other way, that his daughters had drowned and he had made it safely for him to live with himself afterwards. And this is also where Buddhists are always advocating on not killing, and obviously fishing as a sport, and also just to get food, you're killing in that incident. So while I love my young brother, I do recognize the wisdom in Buddhism there that protects us from harmful adventures, misadventures in this case. Suchi told a story about someone called Mr. Wu, who was in Taiwan, and he loved to fish. But he loved to fish with a passion, and he would even do the fishing, not waiting there patiently. He would throw multiple large hooks actually into the water and drag them around. And as they would drag, they would catch many fish that would hook out, with many of them twisting and turning on those hooks. So blood everywhere. But he would feel satisfied at that time. He would feel joyful, gleeful. Good, look, I've got more. I'm going to get some more again, and got more. Never mind the distress. And then sometime after a while of doing this, he was having a barbecue, and he was cooking up fish, and a fish bone got caught right in his throat, and choking, gagging, and then not able to take solid food. He was hospitalized. He went to 3 different hospitals. He also tried folk remedies to deal with this problem, and he didn't manage to do anything. And then one day he made this asseveration, he made this promise, he made a vow: I will stop eating all fish and meat. He made a vegetarian asseveration. And in Buddhism, we have this choice. It's not compulsory. But he did this aspiration: I will stop all killing of life. Sure enough, within a very short space of time, the fishbone was released. And he was able then to eat solid food. And from then on, he did vegetarian vows, and he did also recycling and cleaning of rivers and oceans, but recycling work. And he didn't have any more problems with this. There's another story about a heron, a crafty heron, it's called. It's one of the Jataka stories. And basically in the story, he has this weaselly idea, because there's many fish in a pond. And so he plotted a plan. And he was, you know how they stand on one leg, don't they? So sometimes you have to put the foot down with stalks. There's a heron anyway. They were stalk heron. They've got this big bag under their, like a shopping bag under their beak, and they keep fish in there. So he was one day sort of standing by the edge, just watching the waters. A deep part, a lot of fish over there, just watching. So, and a crab came up and said to him, "Hey, heron, what are you doing then?" He goes, "Just thinking." And they said, "Oh, well, what do you think about? You don't normally sound like thinking. Is there any problem?" He goes, "No, not really. I mean, there may be. I mean, for people like you, but not for me. No, I'm fine." He goes, "What do you mean?" He said, "No. Well, there's this fisherman. I know there's some fishermen coming to this pond pretty soon, but hey, nothing of me. But I mean, I know they like fish and crab, but not my problem." Oh, so the crab went off sideways. And then he went off, and he started talking with some of the other creatures. And this rumor got to the head of the fish. And the head of the fish came, "Wait, what's all this? Somebody said that the heron had said that there was some people coming here. Is that right? Is there any news in this? We should get to safety. Is there anything we can do? We got to get out of here. We're in problems. We could all get killed. We're all going to get dead." So the heron said, "Well, I mean, I could help you out. I mean, I did hear that. It was me. I know for sure. Yeah. It's not until the end of the week. You've got plenty of time. But I mean, if I can be of any help and assistance, I know there's another pond that I've seen, afloat high up. It's bigger than this one, quite nice, and plenty of room in my bill under here. If you want, I'll quite happily help you out. No, anything I can do for an old friend like you guys, yeah, for sure." And the kingfisher, "You've saved us, our savior. Thank you so much. I'd really appreciate that. If you want to start right away, because end of the week, I mean, we got a lot of fish. So if you want to give us a hand." So the heron said, well, okay, I'll stay here and just open my mouth if you guys want to jump in. And she goes, okay. So the king of the fish said, over here, jump in, and you go, one by one. Okay, form a line. Okay, in you go, wearing a mask. Okay, in you go. So they all fill up until the whole sack's full up. He goes, I'll be back in a little bit. So, and he goes. Of course, he just goes to a flat rock. He's a fish eater. He eats fish. So lands down on this, far out of sight of the water and everything. And he lands on this flat rock, scoops them out, smashes them, kills all the fish, and then like munch. Swallows all the dead fish. Leaves all the bones scattered about. And so goes back and, and they go, oh, thank you so much. They're in safety. We're really pleased that you can help us. Come on. Any more coming? Crab, do you, so he does this back and forth for 7 days. And then one day the crab comes up and says, well, those fishermen get crabs as well. Like they do eat crabs and they barbecue them and everything. So, I mean, would you be considering? And the heron says, don't even ask again. Of course you can. Go on, jump up. You can grab on with your claws and, or jump inside if you want. I don't know. So he jumps inside, sits there. So he flies over, and when they're up high, the crab looks down. Looks down and he sees the rock and all of these scattered fish bones, fresh all over there, and you're like, I know what you're doing. So he pretends not to have seen. And so the heron comes down into land, lands down, and the crab says, it's okay, just drop me off just right here. I'll go the rest of the way. I can see the little pond just over here. Thank you very much. You've been so kind. And he gets out of the heron's mouth, turns around and just goes, breaks the heron's neck, kills him while unswitching. He goes, I know what you're up to. You are kidnapping and eating alive all of the fish from the place. So you're going to pay the punishment now. And then kills him and then returns back by the long route, back to the other pond and tells the king of the fish that it was all a trick. And the moral of the story is what goes around comes around. That if you do bad, you'll get bad. But remember, this is the Jatakas. This is actually before the Buddha became a Buddha and before he was perfect. So after that, and there wasn't any much killing. But you get quite a bit of that revenge stories in the Jatakas. They're quite grim of them. A bit like Tom and Jerry stories. They're very rough. Lots of arguing and quarreling and fighting and killing, actually. Yeah. Good. So I'm just going to bring this to an end. So remember, harmony is from sweet speech, sincere speech, kind speech, gentle speech, and clear and direct. Share with your people you live with what you like about them, how they're beneficial to be around, how harmonious you feel when you're with them, and how easy they are to live with. Share about their positive aspects, like that. And if there are any problems, that you can share. You can do your fair share of the work, but you can always communicate. Mostly, sometimes you can't always sort things out. Then we have to take further measures, or if it's more complicated. But as a general guideline, harmony can be found and maintained through these means, which is avoiding deceitful or lying speech, avoiding slander, talking bad about other people, talking in harsh, aggressive, sarcastic, nasty, or shouting tones, and also avoiding just speaking nonsense, frivolous nonsense, because life's too short. And therefore, these are the 4 types of speech to be avoided if we don't want to disintegrate the harmony, the natural harmony that we have. So we try to nourish harmony, and therefore we avoid quarreling, and we avoid all kinds of discord. And then we can live happily with other people and happily with ourselves. So with that, I would like to pause our talk, and if there's any questions and answers, I invite you all to contribute. So Namo Buddhaya, Namo Buddhaya, and Namo Buddhaya.